Three Sinister Camping Tales, Unexplained Forest Horrors Revealed, Volume 2 of the Haunted Chronicles. The stars hung eerily above Whispering Pines Forest, a beauty cloaked in menace. Claire's heart raced as she parked at the campsite. The weight of grief settled heavier than the cool evening air. Her late husband's laughter echoed in her mind, but now the forest felt invasive, like it could swallow her whole. She stepped out, the silence around them throbbing. It was more than woods. It was an unsettling mass with secrets. 8-year-old Ella tugged at her sleeve, while Daniel clutched his stuffed bear tightly, more wary than excited. The camp was wrong. It felt wrong. Setting up the tent became a ritual of nerves. Old branches twisted above, their garnered forms looking like reaching fingers. Dust swirled about their feet like whispers stealing through the air. Just the wind, Claire reassured herself, though a strange tingling crawled up her spine. A distant howl echoed, prying deep into her thoughts. Her life felt like a pieced-together puzzle, now missing flesh and warmth. The look on Ella's face reminded her of her late husband, confusion mixed with an unsettling awareness. Shadows danced confidently between the trees. Each flicker felt menacing, yet she tried her best to ignore it. Then came the night. Darkness dropped a heavy blanket over the campsite. Paranormal sounds vibrated through the stillness. Grunts, gasps, then whispers. "Mom, what's that?" Daniel's voice cracked, sending panic surging in Claire's chest. She scooted closer to her children, her mouth dry as she shared stories about woodland creatures. "There are fairies and sprites," she said, her voice faltering, but deep down she questioned whether they were safe. The forest encased them, breathing, uninvited, and pulsing with mystery. The restroom was nearby. She needed to escape, even if for a moment. The darkness outside felt alive. Shadows crawled amongst the trees, forked by the moonlight. Her quickened steps crunched against foliage, panic sneaking through her solid facade. Then she saw them, figures dressed in dark uniforms congregating, muffled voices trading prophecies of doom. "Protect the woods," they stated ominously, exchanging glances that chilled her bones. Who were they? The fear was electric as she backed away, feeling the noose of dread tightening around her. Those disappearances, could this be the answer? Claire rushed back, her breath shallow. She needed to keep her children from knowing her worry. Ella looked up, eyes wide. Was she sensing what Claire couldn't explain? Even Daniel was fidgety, eyes scanning the tree line. "Mom, I heard something," he whispered, his small frame trembling. The flickering shadows felt like living shadows, creeping closer, more demanding. Then a shriek shattered the silence, echoing through every fiber of Claire. The noise dragged through the darkness, cloaked in fear. "Stay close,"
she urged, the taste of dread bitter on her tongue. Ella stared past her, a soft voice trembling. "There's a man. He's wearing a hat." The blood left Claire's face, panic knotting in her throat. A man in a hat? The whispers of the woods seemed to scream their own history. Could this be the spirit her husband warned her about? She felt propelled into a decision, yet gripped by fear, she struggled to stand her ground. Who could she trust? The night thickened, and doom loomed oppressively close, waiting for its moment. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The rustle of leaves turned menacing. The soft crack of branches followed them, colder than the night air. Her heart thundered, every instinct pleading her to flee. But what lay beyond was a dark unknown. The harsh glow of their flashlight caught a glimpse of movement. A silhouette rolled back, disappearing behind a tree. They weren't alone. The shadows were shifting. The screams were coming for them. What would Claire choose? She'd risk everything, but could she trust her own instincts? Time was slipping, and with it, her hope. As darkness painted the sky, the forest's secrets clawed their way to the surface, ready to unveil horror beyond comprehension. The night pressed on, enveloping Claire and her children in an unbearable cloak of dread. The whispering winds morphed into groans, as if the trees were sharing their morbid tales. She could feel the chill seeping deeper into her bones. "We need to get inside the tent," Claire whispered, pulling Ella and Daniel close to her side. But the sight of their tent, a flimsy barrier from the encroaching darkness, felt like a cruel joke. Daniel's bear hung limp in his hand, the toy almost as scared as the boy. "What's happening, Mommy?" he whispered, his voice trembling. She wished she had the right words, something to make the fear vanish like mist. A childish innocence glowed in his eyes, urging her to protect him from the horrors that lurked outside. Nothing's happening, sweetie, Claire said, but even she didn't believe it. Above them, the shadows tangled in a grotesque waltz, almost dancing, mocking her feeble attempt to comfort her children. Then, from the depths of the forest came the shriek again, a haunting cry of something more than human. What was that? Ella's voice quivered, eyes wide with terror. Without thinking, Claire gripped both their hands tightly.
The air felt thick, stifling. She could almost taste the impending doom that clung to her like a second skin. They rushed for the tent, hearts racing, and the icy hands of fear clutching at their insides. As they stumbled inside, the sound of their breath echoed loudly in the confined space. Claire hastily zipped the entrance shut. The rustling outside became punctuated by snickers, low, sinister laughter that reverberated through the very fabric of their shelter. It was as if the forest itself was celebrating their fear, feasting on their panic. "Mommy, I don't want to stay here," said Daniel, pulling at the sleeping bag. Ella's fingers dug into Claire's arm, her small body quaking. "We should go home," she whimpered. Claire's heart screamed for them to flee, but her thoughts collided. The car was parked several yards away, open ground to cross, with no light but the menacing glow of their flashlight. Claire's mind raced. Could they brave the shadows? What might lurk beyond the safety of their tent? A figure moved in the corner of her eye, behind the trees that held her darkest fears. "Stay quiet," she whispered. The laughter grew louder, sharper, breaking through her resolve. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut, breath quickening. Ella's gaze was transfixed on the zipper of the tent, as if expecting the worst. Claire gritted her teeth, her fists trembling as uncertainty clawed at her mind. Then came the tapping. It was soft at first, but grew increasingly urgent. Something was tapping outside their tent, thin and rhythmic. "What if it's just an animal?" she whispered, unsure if she could even convince herself. The laughter stopped abruptly. In the silence, the tapping seemed to speak, almost beckoning. "Let me in," it seemed to say. Claire's blood ran cold. The words rooted her in place. Something inside her twisted, a deep instinct telling her to refuse whatever was beyond the thin canvas walls. But in the hollowness of the deadly quiet, curiosity gnawed at her determination. "Mom," Daniel's voice broke the silence again. "What if it's not an animal?" "I don't know, baby," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, a figure broke through the shadows, tall and gaunt. It was wearing a hat, just like Ella had said. The outline hovered just outside their tent, breathing in sync with her fear. Claire's heart thundered like a drum in her chest, echoing a primal instinct that screamed at her to run. As the figure raised a hand, Claire realized she was about to discover whether curiosity would save or condemn them all. The shroud of night thickened as the tent trembled under a gust of wind. What would they uncover when the figure stepped forward? Would it be salvation or something far worse? With breaths held and terror mounting, Claire prepared for whatever haunted the shadows. The figure loomed just outside the tent, a distorted silhouette against the night.
Its fingers stretched long, frail, and almost skeletal, as if they could wrap around Claire's heart and crush it. In that moment, time slipped away, the world reduced to that singular point of terror. "Mommy," Daniel's voice trembled, barely above a whisper. His grip tightened, knuckles white against her skin. She could not move. Claire's instinct screamed for her to bolt, to grab her kids and run, but a strange compulsion rooted her in place. The figure swayed, as if coaxed by the wind, and the shadows danced with it. "Why won't it just go away?" Ella whimpered, her eyes darting between Claire and the ghastly shape. "What if it—" "Don't say that," Claire hissed, her heart racing. The last thing she wanted was to invite whatever the nightmare was inside. The air grew heavier, every breath thick with impending doom. The figure's hand rose slowly, palm flat against the tent. Claire's breath quickened as dread filled the air like a shroud. A soft voice broke the tension, its tones sweet, yet laced with something putrid. "Please, let me in." "Mommy," Daniel whimpered, and at that moment, Claire broke free from her paralysis. "Stay behind me," she ordered, gathering the kids together. Just then, The hand thudded against the tent with a jarring thwack as if it were demanding entry. The canvas shivered under the force. Panic surged through her. "What do we do? What do we do?" The voice from outside was becoming more insistent, dripping with an unholy need. "Mommy, please." Ella's face was pale, tears glistening in the dim light of the flashlight flickering in their tent. "Shh," Claire whispered, urgently scanning the tiny space for anything to defend them with. Her eyes landed on a camping knife, a flimsy but sharp panic weapon that offered little comfort. "Stay quiet," she hissed, clutching it tightly. The tapping returned, more frantic now, echoing, almost rhythmic, a taunt from the shadows. "I can help you," the voice urged, merging with the tapping until its words became a sadistic lullaby. Claire's heart raced harder. Every instinct told her to keep the door shut, to ignore the plea, but the ache in her chest screamed that something was wrong. What kind of being offered help beneath such dark skies? "Mommy," Daniel's soft plea interrupted her thoughts, a desperate hand tugging at her shirt. "Me too," Ella echoed, and with that, Claire felt the full weight of her children's fear, their longing for safety piercing through her own. She took a deep, trembling breath. Okay. Right then, with the weight of her decision settling like lead in her stomach, Claire made up her mind. "I need to know what it wants," she said, her resolution crumbling even as she spoke. "No," both kids gasped, urgent and terrified, but the desperation to uncover the truth pulled at her like a moth to flame. "Trust me," Claire whispered, even though self-doubt gnawed at her. She leaned closer to the tent's zipper, heart pounding as she prepared to face whatever lay beyond the cloth. "Please, let me in." The voice was pleading now, almost sweet like honey, wrapping around her senses, beckoning. As she reached for the zipper, a gust of wind howled, stealing her breath away and sending a shiver down her spine. What would she invite in? With a deep conviction, or perhaps desperation, Claire pulled the zipper down, the sound echoing far too loudly in the dead of night. And the moment the flap opened, everything changed. A chilling whisper wrapped around the air, and the figure lurched forward. Claire gasped, paralyzed by a sense of dread more potent than any fear she had ever known. "Welcome home," the figure said, and Claire realized too late that the true horror was only beginning. What kind of nightmare had she unleashed? Would they survive the encounter with whatever it was that waited in the darkness? The air was thick, an oppressive weight that transformed every breath into an effort. Claire's heart thundered in her chest as the figure stepped through the tent flap, the sickly sweet scent of decay wafting in behind it. The shadow twisted and turned, its form shifting, every movement grotesquely fluid, as though it had no bones to support its unnatural body. Who are you?" Claire managed, clutching the camping knife with a white-knuckled grip, her other hand firm on her children's shoulders. "Just a friend," the figure cooed, its voice simmering with an unsettling warmth that crawled across her skin. "Friends don't knock like that," Ella shrieked, but the sound barely escaped her trembling lips, shrinking into silence. The figure leaned in, its elongated face looming close, features barely illuminated by the weak flashlight flickering on the ground. Hollow eyes that seemed to absorb the feeble light met Claire's gaze, and despite the instinct to recoil, she couldn't look away. There was a sick thrill in the way it studied her, as if it made a meal out of her fear. "What's your name?" it asked, a hint of playful curiosity dancing in its tone. "Claire," she responded, hesitance lacing her voice. She glanced at Daniel and Ella, their eyes wide, reflecting her own terror back at her. "Claire, what a lovely name," the figure said, its smile stretching unnaturally wide across its face. "You see, I've been waiting for you, all of you." "Waiting for what?" Claire's voice trembled. As that simply won't do, the figure tilted its head, each movement accentuating its malice as it shifted closer. The children shrank behind Claire, their tiny frames trembling with fear. "Let me show you." With that, the shadow flicked its wrist, and the world around them twisted. The tent walls were gone. In their place, a desolate landscape unfolded, a twisted forest shrouded in fog, trees eerily aware, their roots writhing in a slow, agonizing dance. Every whispering branch sounded like mocking laughter, echoing in her ears.
"Welcome to the home we've chosen for you," the figure said, its voice thick with delight. "What have you done?" Claire gasped, stepping back, but the figure surged forward, blocking her escape. "I've only honored your wish to see what lies beneath the surface, Claire. You're all so curious, aren't you?" Daniel whimpered, and Claire felt her heart splinter. "Please, we don't want to see," she pleaded, brandishing the knife. "But you must. Every soul must learn its place." With a flick of his skeletal fingers, shadows coalesced around Claire and her children, swirling like a tempest. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of dread and longing, pulling at their minds and hearts. Images of dark memories, unsettling thoughts, and deep-rooted fears flooded in, tearing at the edges of reality. "No!" Claire yelled, her own voice lost in the clamor of insistent cries. She was losing them, losing herself. Suddenly, the forest seemed to pulse, a heart beating beneath the ground. The trees moved in a twisted dance, the roots creeping closer, eager claws aching to drag them into the darkness. Claire's pulse quickened, adrenaline surging through her veins. With one last desperate effort, she thrust the knife forward, but the figure just laughed, a sound that sliced through the chaos. "You're not in control here, Claire. Not yet." Yet something inside her sparked. She had to fight, for her children, for herself. She glanced at Daniel and Ella, their eyes wide with terror. "Hang on!" she shouted, as she surged towards the tangled roots, wanting to rip her family away from this terror. As the shadows yanked at her clothes, dragging her back, Claire felt a powerful, desperate connection to her children. "No!" she screamed, and as she pulled against the strength of darkness, she could almost feel something shifting within the very fabric of that nightmarish world. With a sudden burst of determination, Claire kicked against the ground, the flashlight sending out a blinding beam, illuminating the ghastly figure momentarily. It shrieked at the light, recoiling. "Run!" Claire shouted, grabbing Daniel and Ella's hands. But when she turned, the path back was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of darkness, and the figure began to move closer again, its grin widening obscenely. "Your journey is only beginning," it hissed, the air thick with malice. As they stood there, frozen in a gripping fear, Claire realized that the true horror wasn't just what lay behind them, but what awaited them at the end of this twisted road. What horrors lurked just beyond their sight? Would they make it out alive, or would they succumb to the shadow's insatiable craving for despair? Claire's thoughts raced, chaos weaving into a sick tapestry of fear as the shadow loomed, its features warped and fluid, like a nightmarish reflection in a funhouse mirror.
She squeezed her children's hands tightly, desperate for their warmth, but terror gripped them all, hearts hammering wildly against the oppressive gloom. "Look for a way out," Claire shouted, her breath hitching as desperation clawed at her throat. The trees pressed in around them, thick and looming like ancient sentinels guarding a dark secret. Shadows writhed and danced in the dim light, taunting her, whispering broken sentences that echoed her worst fears. "Don't listen," Claire urged as she pulled her kids closer. Their faces were ghostly pale, eyes wide and glistening with tears. She had to protect them, no matter the cost. "Where do we go?" Daniel whimpered, glancing from the shadow to Claire, his small frame trembling. "Anywhere but here. We need to find a way back." The anguished cries grew in volume, morphing into a deafening cacophony. Images darted through her mind, fleeting memories of laughter, sunlight, and safety, being consumed by a pitch-black void. Claire closed her eyes, blocking out the madness, hoping to summon clarity, but the whispers crept in, slithering around her thoughts, promising hidden truths if only she'd let go of hope. "Claire," the figure crooned, its tone dripping with sickening sweetness, "you can't escape what you've invited in." "What do you mean?" Claire's voice broke, doubt creeping in like cold fingers. It was right. Hadn't she invited adventure? Curiosity? She steeled herself, shaking away the invasive thoughts. "No!" Ella shouted, her small frame quaking with defiance. "We don't want anything from you." The figure chuckled softly, an unsettling sound that vibrated in the cold air. "Ah, sweet child, that is precisely what you don't understand. You may wish to flee, but you already belong to this world." Suddenly the ground trembled. The roots of the trees flicked toward them, sharp and needle-like, tugging at Claire's legs, trying to pull her down. She steadied herself, the knife reflecting the flickering light, and with a primal scream she slashed wildly at the tendrils. "Leave us alone!"
The roots recoiled momentarily, as if stung, but the figure laughed even louder, delighted. Claire's panic surged as she scanned their surroundings. It seemed their only option was the dense fog, swirling ominously just beyond the trees. "Daniel, Ella, follow me," she commanded, shoving back against the roots, forcing herself forward. They plunged into the fog, the darkness swallowing them whole, but Claire kept moving, one step after another, adrenaline thrumming through her veins. The laughter faded behind them, but its echo haunted the air, reminding her of the shadow's presence, lurking just out of sight. A flicker of hope ignited within her. If they could break through, maybe they could find daylight again. If they reached the edge of this nightmare, if only they could. Her thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a piercing shriek that sliced through the air. Claire's heart dropped.
Ella had stumbled, falling onto the ground, the tendrils ensnaring her ankle, dragging her back toward the figure. "Ella!" Claire shouted, lunging forward, but Daniel's small hand clasped her arm, his eyes wide with fear. "Don't let go, Mom! We have to hold on!" With every ounce of strength, Claire yanked on Ella, pulling against the endless pull of the darkness. The roots fought back, but Claire was relentless. "Hold on!" Claire roared, planting her feet firmly as she heaved, her spirit infusing strength into her frantic movements. "Mommy!" Ella cried, her voice trembling, but the terror held her fast. Just as Claire felt her strength waning, the mist shifted, casting aside despair. A burst of light pierced through, a glimmer promising salvation, but it flickered dangerously. Claire caught a fleeting glimpse of something moving beyond the shadows, a glimpse of a way out. With a final scream of defiance, she felt the darkness clawing at her, pulling her children, threatening to tear them apart. Could they reach the light, or would the shadows reclaim them, sealing their fate forever in this hellish realm? The figure's voice echoed ominously behind them. "You'll never escape. This is just the beginning." And as the light flickered, Claire's heart raced. What waited on the other side? Would freedom be a dream or a deeper nightmare? Claire's breath came in sharp gasps as the light ahead flickered like a dying star. The tendrils continued to writhe, pulling Ella deeper into the void. A pounding desperation surged through her. She couldn't let them lose their grip. "Just a little farther," she urged, her voice strained, laced with a raw, primal fear. Ella's eyes bore the reflection of terror, glistening pools that promised love laced with sorrow. "Mommy, don't let go!" The shadows howled in anguish, twisting and contorting, trying to pierce through Claire's resolve. But as long as she drew breath, she would fight. She could not let this be the end. The knife glinted in her hand, the only thing that felt solid in a world turned upside down. "Tighter!" Claire yelled, yanking Ella's other arm with a fevered strength. Then, with a scream that echoed like thunder, she slashed at the roots. They recoiled, hissing angrily, but the pull on Ella only intensified. Daniel's grip was a desperate vice, his small body trembling as he whispered, "We'll win, Mom. We have to." The flickering light ahead morphed into shapes, twisting figures darting in and out of their perception, illusions made tangible by fear. Claire squinted against the brightness, hoping to see a glimmer of salvation, a way out. "Come on!" Claire shouted as she threw her fleeting hope toward her children. "We can do this together!" Suddenly, the figure materialized again, closer now, its unsettling voice slithered around her, coiling tight. "You think your love is enough. You think you can outrun fate." "No!" Claire shouted back defiantly. "You don't own us." With a final surge of will, she heaved Ella forward. The girl broke free of the roots, just as Claire felt one whip around her ankle and jerk her downward. Daniel screamed, pulling with all his might. The world seemed to crackle, as if the air itself were solid with terror. Then, in one swift motion, Claire plunged the knife into the earth, grasping Ella's wrist and sending wild, ragged breaths through her lips. "Break this! We need to break free!" Ella, eyes wide and glistening, and so innocent against the chaos, attempted to help, pulling on the roots that bound Claire's legs as they drew closer to the light and fought against their fear. As the light pulsed, Claire caught a glimpse of silhouettes behind it, faces she'd known, loved, lost. They swirled within the radiance, their silent screams echoing in a wind that felt alive. But she forced herself to focus. She couldn't afford to drown in the memories now. Finally, with a final soul-crushing force, the roots recoiled with a shriek, releasing their grip as they retreated into the ground. Claire yanked herself free, tumbling into Daniel and Ella,
their bodies crashing together as the light grew larger, consuming them. And then, silence descended like a weight. The sound of their heartbeats drowned out the chaos, filling the void left by their escape. Yet the tension hung heavy, pressing upon them. Claire pulled back, her eyes darting around. "Where are we?" Daniel whispered, his voice barely a tremor. As her eyes adjusted, she realized they were no longer in the oppressive forest. They stood on a flat expanse, an eerie clearing brightened by a ghostly moon. But something felt off. This place was wrong. The air tasted strange, heavy, suffocating. "Mama, it's cold," Ella whined, wrapping herself tightly against Claire's side. Claire sensed it before she saw it, the creeping shadows at the edges of the clearing, thickening like fog rolling in, slithering toward them, eager to drown the newfound light. "Stay close," Claire barked, her instincts kicking into overdrive. "We can't let them find us again." But no sooner had the words left her mouth than the shadows began to swirl. The ground quaked as if something beneath it stirred awake. Claire's heart sank as she felt a familiar feeling, a tugging at her very core, the same chilling call she had felt before, a draw back toward the darkened depths. "Claire." The shadows hissed her name, each whisper sending shivers cascading down her spine, and she knew then they hadn't escaped. "Run!" she screamed as the shadows lunged, a sea of darkness flipping over the moonlight. What awaited them next? Would Claire's fight end here, or was there still a flicker of hope to grasp? As they sprinted, the chase began, and she could practically hear the laughter trailing behind them. The darkness surged forward, a thick blanket of shadows ready to smother them. Claire could hear the whispers clearer now, like a sinister chorus, each word wrapped in malice.
"Come back. Claire, you belong with us." "Faster!" Claire shouted, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She felt Daniel's small hand slip from hers momentarily, and panic clutched her heart. She turned just in time to see him stumble, tripping over a tangled vine that writhed and coiled like a serpent. "Daniel!" she cried, lunging to grab him just as he regained his footing, his expression a mask of sheer terror mixed with determination. Ella clung to Claire's leg, her little body shaking as the shadows lunged, now at alarming speed, snapping at their heels. They were gaining on them. The clearing pulsed with an unnatural energy, the ground vibrating as if a heartbeat resided beneath. Claire felt the pull of the dark urgency with every stride. It was whispering to her desires, echoing promises of safety, warmth she hadn't known in ages. But she shook her head violently, splintering the treacherous thoughts. "Stay with me! Do not listen!" she yelled, her voice hoarse, strength waning. The thin fabric of her resolve felt like it might tear at any moment. They surged forward, aiming for the distant glow that beckoned with hope, but the rocks beneath their feet began to shift, as if the earth itself was trying to swallow them. Branches clawed at their legs, and the shadows began to wrap around them like tentacles, tugging and pulling in a desperate attempt to drag them back. "Mommy, I'm scared," Ella wailed, crying for reassurance as fear gnawed at her innocence. I know, just hold on," Claire urged, forcing her body to pick up speed, sweat breaking like cold beads on her brow. They burst into the heart of the clearing, but the laughter grew louder, echoing haunting melodies that felt oddly familiar. With each step, Claire felt the shadows tug harder, their eerie laughter morphing into mocking whispers. "You can't escape, Claire. You'll never escape." All at once, the moon broke free from the suffocating clouds, and for a brief moment, the clearing lit up in a ghostly shimmer. Shadows shrank back, hissing and recoiling as the light chased them away. Claire seized this moment of fleeting hope, clutching Daniel and Ella tight. "We have to keep moving. We can't let the dark win." They sprinted towards the edge of the clearing, but as they neared the light, an unseen force slammed into Claire, knocking her off balance. She fell, tumbling across the ground, her hand flailing through soil and dirt. "Mom!" Daniel shouted, his voice raw with fear. Ella crouched beside Claire, her wide eyes reflecting panic that was infectious. Claire struggled against the force pinning her, her heart racing. Shadows curled around her legs, the grip growing tighter, like a vice intent on pulling her down. "Don't fight. Embrace it," the sharp voice cooed, gliding out like silk. Her senses screamed for her to break free, to resist the oppressive darkness, but there was a sickening sweetness to the whispers. Claire's vision blurred as she felt herself drifting. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream sliced through the air, jolting her back to reality. "Daniel!" she cried, desperation fueling her fight against the pressing shadows. But there, in the corner of the clearing, Daniel was surrounded by wisps of darkness, the echoes of his name mingling with their twisted laughter, as if he were already losing the battle. "Mom, help me!" he pleaded, eyes wide with terror, fighting against the grasp that pulled him back toward the shadows. The sight struck Claire like a punch in the gut. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. "No!" she screamed, eyes blazing with resolve. "I will not let them take you." Breathing deep, she forced every ounce of love, hope, and sheer survival into one guttural scream. "You will not take my children." The shadows shuddered, pulling back just a fraction, and in that sliver of space, Claire fiercely pulled herself upright. "Grab my hand! Grab Ella's!" In that agonizing, heart-pounding moment, Claire felt something shift in the air, the whispering shadows hesitating, sensing defiance. But as they reached for Daniel, melting into a sticky blackness, a new, more sinister presence thickened the air. The edges of the clearing darkened even further, and a new figure materialized from the shadows, its presence smothering, malicious. "You thought you could escape, but you've only just begun to feel our wrath." Claire turned to face the figure, dread pooling in her stomach. It wasn't done with them yet. The chase was far from over. What nightmare awaited them now? As the shadows regrouped, swirling with renewed vigor, Claire's resolve would be tested further than ever before. The figure wavered, a grotesque silhouette twisting against the moonlight. Claire felt her stomach churn, bile rising. It was impossibly tall, its limbs long and spindly, fingers ending in jagged points that seemed to draw the very light from the air. The shadows wrapped tighter around her, squeezing like a vice, and for a split second, she felt the urge to submit. "No," she breathed, gripping her children's hands with the last of her strength. Her heart raced, the thumping like a wild drum echoing in her ears. "Not today." But the entity only smiled, a grin stretching wide and unnervingly human, yet void of any warmth. "You fear me, Claire. You tremble because you know what awaits." Ella buried her face against her thigh, trembling. "Mommy, I'm scared," she whimpered, her small voice barely a whisper. "Trust me," Claire whispered back, steeling herself. The woods around them seemed alive, branches whipping in agitated winds, whispering secrets of terror as they rustled. With each pulse of darkness, memories flooded Claire's mind, a suffocating sense of loss, an inexplicable void gnawing at her heart. "What do you want?" she hissed, pushing through the pressing fear. "Just let us go."
"It's not what I want, dear Claire," the figure replied, its voice a hissing wind. "It's what has already been taken from you, what you wish to reclaim." "No." The shadows coiled tighter, clawing at her resolve. Visions of her past spun in her mind, loss, pain, that fire that stole everything. It mocked her, intertwining with the laughter that echoed through the clearing. "Fight it!" she shouted, forcing her gaze back to her children. Daniel's brave face stared at her, all determination. "Hold on, just hold on." The shadows flickered, hesitating at her fervent words. With the light fading away, Claire felt a surge of energy ignite her heart. "You want what I've lost? Then you'll have to take me." The words fell from her lips like an incantation, resonating with a fierce desperation. The figure laughed, low and guttural. "You misunderstand, Claire. This is not just about you. It is not about your pain. It is about the bond that will shatter you." With those words, the entity stretched its arms wide, shadow tendrils gravitating towards her children, aiming to suck away their very essence. "No!" Claire screamed, no longer just resisting, but pushing against the darkness. She felt something shift deep within her. "I will protect them!" Adrenaline surged, propelling her body forward. She released Daniel's hand, reaching for the looming tendrils, claws scraping beneath her fingertips. She would not let them touch her children. She could feel their warmth, their life, flooded through her as she grasped for the slithering shadows, speaking words she didn't understand. The ground trembled violently, a rumbling echo resonating through the night. The shadows halted, caught by her sheer will, recoiling like a scalded animal.
The figure's expression twisted into fury, its form flickering, becoming more unstable. "Foolish mother," it bellowed, and the laughter erupted again, but this time tinged with a hint of panic. "You think you can defy us? You will know despair like never before." The shadows shivered, casting new shapes around them. Faces emerged, twisted and crying out, ghostly figures trapped between realms. Claire's heart raced as she realized they were those who had come before her, victims of the same darkness. In the flickering light, she spotted a glimmering path through the shadows. Her escape. It was calling her, but it meant abandoning the lost souls. Her mind wrestled with an agonizing choice. Leave her kids and tether herself to those spirits, or fight just for her own. "Mommy," Daniel gasped, pointing toward a new tide of darkness swelling from behind the figure. "Quick!" The moment suddenly felt electric, charged with unbearable tension. Claire's breath hitched. What would happen if she turned away from their pleas? In that pulse of terror, she took a step toward the glow, but the shadows surged back with venomous energy, shrieking as they advanced. Would the light be their salvation, or would it burn them away for good?
The chilling whispers intensified, and Claire could sense the impending doom tightening. They were not safe yet. The question escaped her lips before she could stop it. What must I sacrifice to save them? Her heart pounded as the darkness coiled tighter around her, a foreboding reminder that the worst was yet to come. The ground shook beneath their feet, a deep rumble that echoed through the twisted trees. Shadows writhed like serpents, pulsating with malevolence, hungry for despair. Claire's breath came faster, panic flickering through her like a match igniting. "Stay close to me," she ordered, her voice shaking but firm. Ella clung tighter, her small body trembling with fear. Daniel stood tall, clenching his fists. "What do we do, Mom?" he asked, eyes wide with determination. "Trust me," Claire replied, though doubt gnawed at her. The dark figure loomed closer, its jagged fingers beckoning with a slow, deliberate caress. "We have to push through the darkness." With every word, she felt the shadows pressing in, testing her resolve. The figure loomed, entrapping them in an icy grip. "You cannot fight what has already laid claim to you," it hissed, its voice a velvet rasp trailing into her mind. "You will all suffer. The bond will be your destruction." Claire felt her heart lurch. The vision of her past flared up, the faces of the ones she lost shining through the dark. She wanted to scream but held back. She had to be strong, for them. "No," she shouted, "you will not take us." The shadows flickered, boiling with anger at her defiance. They twisted and lunged, snapping in acute movements like starving dogs. The air crackled with a horrible energy, and Claire could sense a wave of cold infesting the space around them. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, shielding his sister. "You won't hurt her," he yelled, his voice raw and desperate. He looked to Claire, seeking strength, but even she felt hollow. A chilling laughter erupted from the figure, echoing through the grove as if the very woods were mocking their bravery. "You misunderstand the nature of your bonds," it taunted. "What you protect, you will lose, and what you cherish will become your curse." Claire shook her head, rallying her strength. "Whatever you are, you won't win," she cried, reaching for the tendrils that threatened to overwhelm them. But the figure sensed her resolve and unleashed a torrent of shadows. The dark mass surged forward, tendrils coiling like vicious snakes, launching toward the children. Claire's heart sank, dread flooding her veins. I could hear their cries, feeling their fear pulse through the air like a chilling wind. "Ella, Daniel," she screamed, grasping for their hands again, but the darkness surged and separated them. Time warped, and what seemed like seconds felt like frozen hours as her children faded from view, swallowed by the swirling shadows. "Mommy," Daniel's voice echoed, dwindling into despair. Panic clawed at her throat. She could not let them vanish. With newfound desperation, Claire focused on the glimmering light ahead. The glimmer grew stronger, pulling her with its soothing warmth, as if it knew her name. It promised safety, but required an answer to a question she couldn't understand. What would it take to save her children? "I'll do anything," Claire cried to the darkness. "Take me! Just let them go!"
The shadows recoiled for a fleeting moment, hesitating as if weighing her offer. "No, you must suffer the bond," the figure said softly, the chaos around them pausing for a heartbeat. "It's your fate to fulfill." "What do you mean?" she shouted, fear crawling across her skin, and then she froze, her breath catching as clarity struck like lightning. It wasn't just a bond to be broken, it was a chain, forged by love, grief, and guilt. As silence blanketed the chaos, the shadows seemed to whisper among themselves, a dreadful anticipation humming through the air. Claire felt a sinking realization clawing at her gut. Could she truly sever the bonds of love? Just then, she caught movement behind the figure, a dark silhouette pulling away from the mass. "Daniel!" The walls of darkness shimmered, revealing him struggling against the tide, those shadows wrapped around him like sinewy vines. "Help me, Mommy!" he gasped, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. Claire's heart ripped in two. She had one choice to make, and it filled her with dread. Would the very act of saving her children doom them all? The light flickered more brightly, desperation clawing at her heart. She could still save them, but at what cost? As Claire took a step forward, she felt the shadows thrash violently. She would have to make a choice, and the darkness closed in around them, waiting with hungry anticipation. What would she have to sacrifice to reclaim the bonds that now threatened to tear them apart? Could she even bear what had to be done, or would it extinguish their last flicker of hope? The shadows surged, a relentless force becoming more chaotic, hungry for despair. Claire's heart pounded violently, each beat screaming for her to act. She felt the icy grip of darkness tightening around them, crushing every ounce of hope. "Let him go! Let him go!" she shouted, desperation clawing at her throat. The figure, an embodiment of all her fears, seemed to feed off her turmoil, its grin widening with each pleading cry. Daniel struggled against the shadows, his face pale and eyes frantic. "Mommy!" he cried, reaching for her, his tiny hands grasping at the air as if willing the darkness to release him. "Anything!" Claire screamed. "I'll do anything! Just take me in place of my children!" The forest echoed with the resonance of her vow, a shuddering stillness enveloping the scene for a moment. The figure paused, clearly intrigued. "Your love binds you," he hissed, weaving through the energy that rippled in the air. "You must suffer to unbind."
The shadows coiled tighter, every inch binding her willpower and resolve. The truth hit her like a lightning bolt. The bond wasn't just one of love. To save her children, she would need to sacrifice the weight of her grief and guilt, the chains that had shackled her since her husband's passing. "Mommy, please!" Ella's voice drifted through the chaos, pulling Claire back from the brink of despair. The innocence in her eyes tore at Claire's heart again, reminding her of the light that remained even in their darkness. "I'm coming," Claire shouted, her mind racing against the tide of affliction, pushing past the crushing dread. She might need to let go of her pain, to accept the loss of everything she held dear, but she couldn't let it devour her children. Taking a deep breath, grounding herself, Claire focused all her love and hurt into a singular thought. "You can't take them. I am their protector." The pressure of the shadows fluctuated, and Claire felt warmth coursing through her veins. The realization flooded her with strength. For too long she had let loss define her, and now she would redefine it. "I embrace my grief, so they will live," she breathed, every word woven from hope. The shadows stirred around her, agitated by her sudden defiance. In that heartbeat, Claire made her choice. No more chains, no more suffering. The declaration echoed as a new light illuminated the clearing. It wasn't just the glow, it was the light of acceptance, of forgiveness, of finally letting her grief become a part of her without ruling over her. "Mommy!" Daniel shouted, caught in a battle between light and dark as the shadows thrashed around him, struggling against the emerging brightness. "Let them go," Claire implored, her voice breaking but booming with a fire she had never allowed herself before. "Take me instead of my children, but I refuse to be enslaved by my past." The air crackled, electricity sparking as the shadows trembled and twisted. The figure's grin warped into a snarl. "You think you can bind yourself to freedom?" it shrieked in fury, yet Claire felt the grip loosening. Her declaration had changed the landscape around them. With a mournful howl, she felt the darkness recoil. "You can't hold on to me with grief," Claire shouted, resolving to release the burden. The shadows lunged, but the light now radiated from within her, a brilliant shield armed with the power of every ounce of love she possessed. "No!" the figure screeched as the tendrils plunged toward her, yearning to reclaim her pain. But Claire persevered. The roots that sought to wrest her back crumbled into dust, unable to withstand the purity of her love for her children. "Catch this!"
Claire! Yelled, extending her arms to her children, the golden warmth enveloping them as they instinctively dashed towards her. Hold hands! We're almost there! The light converged, brightening with exhilarating warmth that filled her kids with buoyant hope. As the figure reeled back, howling in agony, the tendrils released Daniel and Ella, their small hands gripping tightly. With a final surge, Claire charged forward, crossing into the luminous glow. The agonizing darkness receded behind them, shrieks of anger and despair filling the air, but they didn't stop. They broke free into a new dawn, a clearing bathed in sunlight, warmth flooding their spirits, filling the hollow places within Claire's heart. Panting, Claire scooped up her children, embracing them fiercely. They were safe. The shadows weren't gone forever, but their darkness could never reach them again. "We did it, Mom!" Daniel exclaimed, relief breaking through his voice as Ella clung to her side, her small body glowing with newfound hope. Claire felt whole again. "Yes, we did. Together," she whispered, a smile bursting free on her face. She looked up, knowing the darkness in the forest would linger, but she would always carry the light within herself and her family. And as they stood in the sunlit clearing, hand in hand, Claire knew that the bonds forged in love could never be severed again. Everything had changed. They had stepped into a new chapter, one bursting with potential and overwhelming love. But they didn't just walk away unscathed. They embraced their bond, holding on tightly to life and each other as they moved into their new dawn. Now remember, this is just the beginning of many more adventures to come. If you don't want to miss what happens next, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss out on exclusive stories that will keep your heart racing. You also want to smash that like button now. It helps us so much with the algorithm. Trust me, your support means everything. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories about the ending. What did you think? Did you expect that? Don't keep it to yourself. And finally, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support the channel. Real fans do.